Awesome. So, hey guys, I'm Rakshaa Viswanathan, and I'm an upcoming SWE at Microsoft India. And I'm currently doing my senior year at NIT Trichy, pursuing the ECS. So, I'll be today's workshop host for Intro to React. So, just a small disclaimer here. How many people are familiar with JavaScript? If you guys could just give me a cheer or just raise your hands, that would be good. All right. How did you guys familiar with JavaScript? Who else? Okay. Is my audio not clear? Okay. Yeah, just a second. Yeah, I think I'll go one second. How about now, guys? No,
It's still a little bit glitchy.
yeah. How about now?
Yeah, much better.
Yeah. Or I'll do one thing. I just get out of the meeting and rejoin again. I think that should be fine. Yeah, just give me a moment.
It's perfectly fine now.
Okay, cool. That's good. That's good. Okay. So sorry about that. Yeah. So there are a few people who are familiar with JavaScript. And for those who aren't, it's basically a coding language that we use with web dev. Okay, it's just like C++ and Python and Java, except that it's a little different on its own terms, and it has a lot more reach and flexibility in terms of what it can be. So let's just dive in and see what is React, where it's used, and we'll do a fun exercise at the end. Yeah, so this is the brief of the content that we will be going today. So first we'll have a small lesson on what is React, and then we'll go looking at what the features of React are. A few tips and tricks, few libraries that I found very useful. And then we have a small demo project that we would be doing at the end. It's not a project as such, but it could be considered an insight into what React is, a small practical exercise. So over here, how many of you guys are web developers? Just raise your hands. Oh, okay. We have 2. Oh, 3. Nice, nice. So this is a generic roadmap of what we would be doing in web dev. So first, we would need to learn HTML, CSS, which forms the basic content of the web page. Then we would be going at JavaScript. So if you need something to be done in a web page rather than just displaying stuff, we definitely need functionality added to it. Yeah. So that's why you need JavaScript. Third is something which needs an interactive framework that will present your front end. So for here, we would be choosing React right now. And the steps 4 and 5 is something that doesn't concern us at the moment. So it's just a database and a backend to have a full stack web dev app. So we would be dealing with front end right now, which is step 3. So these are a few famous front end frameworks and libraries. Any users of Angular or Vue here? Just give me a cheer. Anyone of you guys heard of these other frameworks? Okay, so we have Nadine. Yeah. So there are actually many frameworks that have come up for front end. The classic ones are Angular, React, and Vue. Angular is technically the oldest amongst these three, and that was developed by Google. We then have React, which is developed by Facebook, and we have Vue, which is actually kind of the latest one. So that's developed by actually a former employee of Google. So Angular, by its very nature, it's really difficult to learn and implement. I mean, there are a lot of guys who do Angular. I'm not saying anything about that. But personally, I really found React to be very easy to learn and easy to use as well. And we have Vue, which is actually a little simpler to learn than React, but it has lesser flexibility when compared to React. So React kind of serves as a middle ground and an optimum, framework that we could use for frontend. So let's move on to the actual theory. So what is React? Anyone here who knows what is React, just type in the chat box, or just unmute and speak. Anything is fine. Yeah, it's a front-end framework. Not exactly a framework, but it's a front-end library that we would be using. To put it in proper formal terms, it's actually a JavaScript library that's used for building the UI UX of a web page. And it actually has a it's actually responsible for the view layer of the application. So there are many layers of a web application. You have the client side and you have the server side. So there are many steps that are involved in the client side that will help you have a live rendering of what you want to see in the web page. For an example, if you want to dynamically, let's say change the values by clicking a button. Let's say we have a counter, okay, that we would be doing later in today's workshop. Say you want to just increase the number that's displayed on the screen with a click of a button, and you don't want the whole thing to reload and cause a lot of time. So for all of these purposes, you use a front-end framework, and React is really good at that. So what is React? So it is actually a declarative framework, and it's a component-based library. So what is declarative? When you say something is declarative, you want to assert what we exactly want instead of telling the computer, how do we do this? So it has, on a surface level, you would be writing very little code in React. But when the React understands it, it would have a rendering surface of its own. And then it would present to you how you actually want to see it. And it's component based in a way that these are basically modularized, big chunks of code written into smaller brackets or smaller components. And these smaller components are either functions or classes that I think we would be discussing further down the lane, what exactly components are. So yeah, let's go ahead now. What are the features of React? So virtual DOM. Does anyone here know what a DOM is? Yeah, it's a document object model. So what exactly is that? It's basically what you see on your screen. And this virtual DOM is actually a concept wherein, an ideal or a virtual representation of a UI is kept in sync with the real DOM or the one that you're actually seeing in your web page. And the library that does this is called React DOM. And this process is actually called reconciliation. Now let's move on to JSX. Okay, this seems really funny, man. We have HTML, we have JavaScript. What is JSX? So JSX actually is JavaScript XML. Any of you guys have heard of what XML is? Okay. So actually XML is basically a type of markup language wherein you use tags to store information. So here it's actually JavaScript that's kind of blended with XML. So if you need to, have an element declared, you could declare it in such a way that it is enclosed between two H1 tags, like this, for example. Over here, we have a constant element actually declared as a tag. So this kind of a hybrid syntax between HTML and JavaScript is actually JSX. So as we had told earlier, a component lets you split the UI into independent and reusable pieces, and you can actually modify each piece in isolation. So there are two types of components. So we have a function component and a class component. So a function component is a component that you are actually defining with the help of a JavaScript function. It's pretty intuitive. And a class component is basically the one that you have inside a class. So it's kind of simple to understand. When you're exporting a function, you call that component a function component. And when you're exporting a class, you call it a class component. And okay, so further into this, so we have props and state. So anyone who has heard of React has heard of these terms, thrown at you: props, state, and components, all of these. So what do they actually mean? Props is actually a special keyword in React, which, as you might, kind of guess, is actually short for properties. And this is used for passing data from one component to another. But the important part here is that the data with the props that's being passed is actually unidirectional. So it only passes from the parent component to the child component. And another noteworthy thing over here is that props data is actually read-only, which means that the data coming from the parent should not be changed by the child components. So I hope you guys got a good grasp of what props are. Then we would just move to state then. State is actually an instance of the React component class, where it is defined as an object of a set of observable properties that controls the behavior of the component. In simpler words, the state of a component is actually an object that holds information that may change over time in the lifetime of the component. So let's say in the case that we took earlier, we have a counter and we want to just keep clicking and changing the value. So over there, we don't need a prop because we would be changing the value of the state or the value of the variable that we would be using in the child space as well. So we would be using a state instead of a prop. So a few tips and tricks that I found really useful, where this is amazing library called Creatica app. So to install this, it's very simple. You need to have npm setup. Npm is actually a node package manager from where you can kind of like extract whatever libraries and whatever modules you want. So you could just do npm install create React app, and wonderfully it gets loaded onto your system, and it really gives a beautiful UI, and it's a good starting point. It has all the files already embedded, and it's really nice to use as well. It's a great starting point for those who want to start off with React. Next is the React Bootstrap. So what is Bootstrap, guys? Any idea what Bootstrap is?
A CSS framework, which I mean, it's kind of a shortcut to apply CSS.
Yeah.
A Bootstrap is a framework that allows the user to design something more better using CSS in shortcut method.
Yeah. So as you guys have told, actually Bootstrap is a very simple and elegant existing stuff that's already there. You can just, import it and you can modify it according to your needs. So there are people who have been working on building amazing components for React. So that's actually called React Bootstrap. And in a similar way, with just like how we imported Create React app, we could also import React Bootstrap. And you guys might have noticed in amazing apps, you have these cute headers, you have these cute buttons, you have these amazing proper professional like UI. Yeah. Ever wondered where that's from? It's actually from Material UI. So most of what we do in React is usually from Material UI. So that's an amazing, library that's created that has these pre-existing components, quite similar to Bootstrap, but you have a lot more, options that's present in Material UI. Next, we have the design tools. I personally like to use Figma for designing my web pages. And we also have Canva that has a lot more illustrations that we could use. And prototyping is kind of a very important part for a web dev. We need to kind of like have a basic look and feel of the website. Yeah. So that's one thing. And I have taken many of my icons from Font Awesome. I truly believe it's awesome. The range and collection that they have is pretty amazing, I should say. And then we have one of the most important features of React, which is the React router. Have you guys seen in the nav bar where you have like 4 or 5 different buttons which you can click, and each of that directs to a different address? Like it would be like, let's say a website /home or a website /about. Have you guys seen those routes in a website? So that's actually done by React router. So you have a special component that lets you link your UI components to the different routes that are present in your project. So that's something that is really helpful in case you need to build, multi-page, projects and such. So here's the fun part, guys. We would be going and doing a small exercise in React. So I'm going to share with you the starter code and let's try and play around with how it goes. Okay. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and I'll send you the link. Just a second. So I want you guys to open this and fork it. I'll just give you a small example on how to do this. So can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay, awesome. So you have a small option here to fork. Yeah, just click on that and the entire sandbox would be forked onto your system. I think you guys might have to, use your GitHub login to connect to the code sandbox, but just do what's necessary. Yeah.
I guess it's allowing us to fork it without actually logging in.
Oh, okay. So you guys, if you guys have a GitHub ID, you can do that. Or I think even if we have the regular, I think it lets you log in with Google as well. I'm not sure. Just try it out. So guys, let me know once you guys have forked the workshop. Okay, Arishi is done. Yeah, Samantha is done as well. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so one of the best features of React is how awesomely responsive it is. So you can just keep typing something and immediately it gets reflected in your browser. So I just want to say hello, Creatica. And awesome. That's it. So let's first actually study the file structure, how it's saved. So we have our public, which is our index HTML. Over here, it basically stores what has to be displayed. You know, when you open it in your browser, you can just copy this and like open it in a new browser. So over here, it has a React app. Yeah. So all those details are present in the head. And inside, you will be having you'll be linking the React over here. And inside SRC, we have our app.js, our index.js, and a styles.css. So let's have a look at index.js because that will be the first thing that's rendered by index.html. So what it says is, you have a DOM that's created. So I had told you guys about React DOM, what exactly it does. So it takes the React DOM and it renders this app component. So when you see something under, a bunch of tags, it's basically a component. So we are calling app component from this file, which is app.js. So what does app.js do? So it has imported the styles from style.css. And now this is actually a function type component that we had learned earlier. So we are having a function inside which we are writing some kind of HTML code and we are returning back. And this export default, it basically means that you can pick it up and import it from that file just by stating this. So you see there are two types of things how it's imported. One is within the curly braces and one is the regular one. So when you specify export default, it means that you're only exporting that thing. There are no two things that are exported. Whereas if you had just written export, let's try that, it would throw us an error over here. So in that case, we need to mention what we are importing from our app.js. This would also work if we have multiple components that we are exporting. So that's not needed right now. So yeah. I had told you about material UI, yeah? So that's something that's amazing and it's a really cool thing that I found. Over here, you have this dependency section. And what you could do is just type at material UI. And you have a thing called material UI code. Just click that. And the dependency adds by itself. Actually, on a regular IDE, which you would use like, VS Code, you might have to type in npm install at material UI code. But this is a really cool way of doing it. And it's pretty modern as well. So what are we going to do? Let's try and create a new component. So we could store these, components as JS or JSX. So I like to go with JSX. So I want to build a counter. Let's call it counter.jsx. So what do we do now? Let's have a class. So I want to import React from React. So this is something that you need to give to have the React DOM setup. So let's now go and try doing our business here. Class Okay, let's just say export default. And what do we need? Class, let's say counter. Okay. Yeah. Now we need a constructor. So what is a constructor exactly? A constructor is basically a function that's invoked the moment you call the class. The moment you create an object of the class, the constructor actually works. So let's say the constructor has some kind of props in here. So we're going to set up super of props. This basically invokes the component of the parent class of this, which we would be including over here. Extends React dot component. So we are using React component, and inside that, we're trying to get the constructor. Now let's try. We need a counter. So we're going to have a button and a number displayed. And the more we keep clicking the button, the number keeps increasing. So what do we need? We need a state. So let's just have a state. And this we are setting as count as 0. So these are the two things that we would be doing inside the constructor. So let's move ahead. We need one function to keep increasing. Yeah. So let's just have this function as increase. And so for those who are familiar with this style of calling a function, it's actually called ES6 method of calling a function. You can either do that or just do func increase. It's basically kind of the same. So let's try going over here. So what do we need to do? We want to set the state as the current state plus 1. So how do we do that? So we are going to call this dot set state, and we're going to pass count as this dot state dot count plus 1. Is it cool, guys? Are you able to follow? So this is a very simple function that we have. So this, what we need to do now, we're going to have a button. So we need a button. So we are going to render now. Inside the render, we would be returning a button. So many of you guys might wonder what this render is. Render is basically a function that calls our React DOM, and we are going to return this value, whatever we are presenting inside, back to the original DOM. So we're going to have a button that says increase. Okay, that's cool. But what does it do? This button without any functionality is kind of nonsensical. So we're just going to have an on click where we are going to use increase function. Okay, sounds good to you guys? Now we are going to have a h1 tag that displays this dot count. Yeah, so this is, why does it show a red line? So one of the major issues of render is that you need to have a definite opening tag and a closing tag. Here we actually have two sets of opening and closing tag. So in that case, what we do is we're going to have a blank opening tag and we're going to have a blank closing tag. Now let's see how it works. We are going to call this inside app. So we're going to import counter from counter. And over here, I use that counter and close this counter. It's very simple. Okay. Okay. So over here, I've made a small error. So I shouldn't be putting this dot count. We are having a function. So we are going to use this dot state dot count. So initially the state is set as 0. So as you keep clicking, it keeps increasing. That's wonderful. Now we could have a decrease as well. Okay, before I start decrease, have you guys done it so far? If you guys have any difficulty in following, just let me know. Have you guys understood so far? If you have any questions, do pop them up. Okay. Yeah, so I'm assuming you guys are following along. We are going to create another decrease function, which is kind of similar to what we did so far. So we are going to have another decrease function that says this dot set state is actually count as this dot set state, sorry, this dot state dot count minus 1. It's pretty intuitive. And what do we need to do now? We want another button. I'm sorry about this. This shouldn't be happening. Yeah. So we're going to have another button just like this one. But instead, on click, we want to call the decrease function. So we're going to keep increasing with this, and we're going to keep decreasing with this. Pretty simple ones, guys. Okay. So what do we do next? We have understood state. I'm assuming you guys have all understood how to use state. So we learned another thing called prop. Yeah. So where do we use props? So for this purpose, I'm going to create another, file called props.jsx. Here, what we're going to do is we're going to have a function import React from React. And let's say we have export default. Let's name this props. And over here, we're going to have props equal to so we're going to put this. Yep. Okay. Here we're going to do return h1 props in the I believe I'm doing some error over here. Just give me a moment. Yeah. But I'm just going to go with const props equal to this. Now we're going to do export default props. So we're going to go ahead and use this in our app.js. So let's say your name is Daisy. Okay, first we need to import this. Import props from props. And now we're going to have a props as Daisy. Just give me a moment. Since actually this is passed as an object. So let's say we have the props has an object, element called name. We're gonna do h1 hello props name equals Daisy. So you have hello Daisy. You could always change this to, let's say Ram or, Elizabeth. Anything. And this is actually dynamic. So we could pass this props from any other external function as well. So that's a little that we have now. Feel free to play around with this. And as I told you earlier, we would be using Material UI to have a better, looking component. So let's try how to use Material UI. So we're going to use the button option from at Material UI code. And we're going to use this button instead. So this is actually a much cuter and neater button. We could also do, we could change the color of this. You have primary, secondary, and accent on this. So we could do secondary for another. Yeah, so you have one increase and one decrease. Or we could also have a variation. And we could set the variant as content. You could see the difference. Yeah, this is a block. And this is kind of like a cool, slim UI kind of thing. And over here, we could also have variant as, outlined. So this is how it turns out. You can keep increasing and decreasing. So if you guys are able to do so far, just raise your hands or just type in the chat box. Anything would be fine. Okay. So this is cool. Actually, you can have multiple stuff set to state as well. You can have like, show true. You can have multiple variables. And you can set here as show true. and show just for fun. Let's try how this goes. And if the show is true, we could, have it present, and if the show is false, we could remove it. It's a little more complex than that, but yeah, we could try that as well. So that's about it for today's coding session. I'm gonna go back to sharing my PPT. Just a second. Yeah. So we've done the practical exercise. You can check out the final code if you guys need any help. Let me share that as well. Another fun thing is, these are the resources that I use generally. You guys can take a screenshot, or I'll just copy it and send it to you guys. Anything of that would be cool. Yeah. So next is a fun jam session that I had planned. Can you guys see my Jamboard? Is it not visible? Okay. So you guys can go to this Jamboard. Tell me if you guys are able to edit it. Yeah. So what I want you guys to do is that just open a sticky note and type everything that comes to mind after today's workshop about React. Okay, so this is gonna take like five minutes max. Just to have an overview of what you guys have learned so far. Awesome. Yeah. Anything else that you guys found cool about React, or anything that you would like to learn more, anything of that sort? Just feel free. This is your space. Yeah, it's a front end too. So are you guys planning to, create something cool with React? Okay, there's a question. Yeah. So what do attributes on HTML tags like on-click have a camel casing? Yeah, they do have a camel casing in React. That's something that's very noteworthy, and thank you for the question. So we have stuff like on-click, on-load, on mouse over. All of this is written in camel case in React. And similarly, we have a camel casing for even the CSS properties that I've not done it this time. So we could actually do something cool with that. Like, you could set the styling as well with the help of React. You could set the width, height of the component appropriately. So this Jamboard will be on even after the workshop. If you guys want to pour in some ideas, give me feedback, anything is fine. Just put it in the Jamboard. And yeah, so that would be the end of the workshop. Thanks a lot. I will take a brief pause here. If you guys have any questions, do let me know in the chat box or the Jamboard. Anything is fine. And this is my email. You guys could, reach out to me through my email or my, website. Anything is fine. Or I would even drop my LinkedIn over here. Just give me a moment. Yeah, do feel free to connect with me. And I hope you guys had a good session. A lot. Thank you.